The war room fell silent when the doors opened. High Admiral Torn stood at the center of the massive holographic display, watching red markers spread across the star map like a disease. 12 systems had fallen in 6 months. The Keth Dominion was winning, and everyone in the room knew it. "We have lost contact with the 7th Fleet," said a young officer, his blue skin pale with fear. "Admiral Voss is presumed dead." Torn closed his 4 eyes and let out a long breath. The Veloci people had led the Galactic Coalition for 300 years. They had built alliances, created trade routes, and maintained peace across 1,000 worlds. Now they were watching everything fall apart. "How long until the Keth reach Volrath 7? He asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less. Volrath 7 was the last major defense point before the inner systems. If it fell, the Coalition capital would be next. Torren had sent every ship he could spare, called in every favor, begged every allied species for help. It was not enough. It would never be enough. "Sir," another officer said, her voice uncertain, "we received a response to the emergency broadcast." Torren looked up. They had sent distress signals to every corner of the galaxy, hoping for anyone who might help. Most species had ignored them or sent polite refusals. Who responded? The officer hesitated. "Earth." The room went completely still. Someone laughed nervously. Another officer shook his head in disbelief. "Earth is a myth," Torren said flatly. "A story we tell children about a death world where everything tries to kill you. There are no survivors from such a place. Sir, I have confirmed the signal origin. It matches the coordinates from the ancient records. And they are not just responding." The officer swallowed hard. "They are coming. A fleet of 47 ships will arrive at Volrath 7 in 3 days. Torren stared at the display as new markers appeared, blue ones, moving fast toward the war zone. His hands trembled slightly. He had heard the old stories like everyone else. Creatures from a world of poison air and burning radiation. Beings who could survive injuries that would kill any other species. Predators who had hunted their own world into submission. Legends, fairy tales, myths. And now they were coming. 3 days later, Commander Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the USS Constellation and watched an alien space station grow larger in the view screen. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm brown eyes that had seen too many battles. Beside him, Lieutenant Megan Price studied the tactical readouts with sharp focus. 46 ships in the station's defensive perimeter, she reported. Mixed classes. Most of them show battle damage. These people have been fighting hard. And losing, Brooks said quietly. He had read the intelligence reports during the journey. The Keth Dominion was brutal and efficient. They conquered worlds and stripped them of resources, leaving nothing behind. The Coalition had been fighting them for decades and slowly losing ground. "Sir, we are being hailed." Brooks straightened his uniform. On screen, the image of High Admiral Torren appeared. The alien was tall and thin, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a narrow face. His skin was deep blue, and he wore an elaborate uniform covered in medals. But Brooks noticed the exhaustion in those 4 eyes. This was a man who had not slept well in a very long time. "I am High Admiral Torren of the Galactic Coalition," the alien said. His voice was translated through the ship's systems, but the skepticism came through clearly. "You claim to be from Earth." "I am Commander Daniel Brooks of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress signal and came to help." Torren studied him for a long moment. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Or imaginary. The stories say your world is a death trap where nothing can survive. "The stories are exaggerated," Brooks said with a small smile. "Earth is difficult, but we managed. We have been isolated for a long time, rebuilding after some troubles of our own. But we heard your call, and we are here now. 47 ships, Torrin said, against the Keth Dominion. You understand what you are facing? We read the reports. Reports do not capture the reality. The Keth have conquered species far more advanced than yours. They do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They simply destroy. Brooks nodded slowly. Then we better not let them. The human fleet docked at the station, and the next several hours became a blur of meetings, inspections, and barely hidden stares. Alien species of every shape and size watched the humans walk through the corridors. Some whispered and pointed. Others kept their distance, as if the humans might attack at any moment. Liaison Officer HFY was assigned to guide the human delegation. He was a small creature with large eyes and fur that changed color with his emotions. Right now, his fur was a nervous shade of yellow. "Commander Brooks," he said, walking quickly to keep up with the humans' long strides. "I must inform you that High Admiral Torrin has assigned your fleet to the rear defensive positions." Lieutenant Price frowned. "The rear? We came here to fight, not to guard supply lines." "It is for your own protection," Kethville said, his fur shifting to orange. "The front lines are extremely dangerous. The Coalition cannot be responsible for what? For what?" Price asked. "For us getting hurt? For you dying needlessly. You are new to this conflict. The rear positions will allow you to observe and learn before engaging in serious combat." Brooks raised a hand to stop Price from arguing further. "We appreciate the Admiral's concern. We will take the positions assigned to us." Kethville's fur shifted to a relieved blue. "Thank you for understanding, Commander." As the liaison hurried away, Price turned to Brooks with frustration in her eyes. "Sir, they are putting us in the corner like children. They do not think we can fight." "I know. So why did you agree?" Brooks looked out a viewport at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the Keth were preparing their next attack. Because arguing will not change their minds. Only actions will. When the time comes, we will show them what humans can do. And if the time does not come, if they keep us in the rear forever. Brooks smiled, but there was no humor in it. In war, the rear never stays safe for long. He was right. 12 hours later, alarms began to scream throughout the station. The Keth had launched a surprise attack on the supply lines and rear defensive positions. They expected to find easy targets and frightened support crews. Instead, they found humans. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was about to learn why Earth was called a death world. The first Keth missiles hit the outer defense stations at exactly midnight, station time. Explosions lit up the darkness of space like deadly flowers blooming in the void. On the bridge of the Constellation, Commander Brooks watched 3 Coalition ships vanish from the tactical display in the first 30 seconds. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered calmly. "Lieutenant Price, tactical analysis." Megan Price's fingers flew across her console. 64 Keth warships coming in fast. They are targeting the supply depots and rear positions. They think this is the weak point. They are about to learn otherwise. Signal the fleet. Formation Delta. We hold this line. Across the human fleet, men and women moved with purpose. There was fear, of course. Fear was natural. But there was also something else, something that the Keth had never faced before. There was determination. On the ground station below, Sergeant Kyle Dawson heard the alarms and grabbed his rifle. He was a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and scars on his hands from years of combat. His squad was already moving, checking weapons and securing their positions. "Contact in 5 minutes," Corporal Nina Vance reported. She was the squad's medic, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands. "Keth landing craft detected." Private Eli Grant swallowed hard and checked his rifle for the third time. He was 22 years old, and this was his first real deployment. His hands were shaking slightly. Dawson noticed. He walked over and put a hand on the young man's shoulder. First time is always the hardest. Stay with me, follow orders, and you will be fine. What if I freeze up? You will not. You know why? Dawson looked him in the eyes. Because your squad is counting on you, and you will not let them down. Grant took a deep breath and nodded. The shaking stopped outside. The first Keth landing craft touched down on the station's outer platforms. The Keth were tall reptilian creatures with dark scales and 4 arms. Each arm carried a weapon. They moved fast and hit hard, and they had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics. They expected frightened supply clerks and panicked support staff. They expected an easy victory. They found Sergeant Dawson's squad waiting for them. The first wave of Keth came through the main corridor in a rush. Dawson let them get halfway before giving the order. Now, the humans opened fire. The corridor became a killing ground. Keth soldiers fell in heaps, their 4 arms reaching for weapons they would never fire. The survivors tried to retreat, but more humans had circled around to block their escape. In the command center, a coalition observer watched the battle feed with all 4 of his eyes wide open. "This is impossible," he whispered. Beside him, another officer shook his head. "They are not even wearing full armor. How are they moving so fast?" On the Constellation, Commander Brooks coordinated the space battle with the same calm efficiency. A Keth destroyer tried to break through the human formation. 2 frigates intercepted it, their weapons firing in perfect coordination. The destroyer exploded, and the frigates were already moving to their next target. "Their formation is breaking," Lieutenant Price reported with satisfaction. "They did not expect resistance like this. Keep pushing. Do not let them regroup." On the station, the Keth sent a second wave. This one was larger, with heavy weapons and armored vehicles. They punched through the outer defenses and pushed toward the central hub. Coalition forces began to fall back, overwhelmed by the assault. But the humans did not fall back. Dawson's squad held a choke point where 3 corridors met. It was the only path to the civilian shelters where hundreds of coalition families were hiding. If the Keth got through, those people would die. "Hold the line," Dawson shouted over the chaos of battle. "Nobody gets past us." Corporal Vance took a hit to her shoulder but kept fighting. Private Grant found himself alone at a side entrance when a group of Keth tried to flank them. He should have been terrified. He should have frozen. Instead, he thought about the children in the shelter behind him. He held that entrance for 11 minutes, alone. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him standing over a pile of Keth bodies. His rifle overheated and his hands burned from the barrel. "Private," Dawson said, staring at the carnage. "What the hell happened here?" Grant looked at him with exhausted eyes. "They tried to get through. I stopped them." News of the battle spread through the coalition forces like wildfire. They watched the recordings of humans fighting without retreat, without surrender. They saw Corporal Vance treating wounded coalition soldiers with the same care she gave her own people. They saw Private Grant's impossible stand on his command ship. Warlord Drethkor received the battle reports and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. His forearms gripped the armrests of his throne as he read the casualty figures. Again and again. "This is wrong," he growled. "These numbers cannot be right." "They are confirmed, Warlord," his adjutant said nervously. "We lost 18 ships and over 3,000 ground troops. The rear positions held. Against what? Who commands these forces?" "A species called humans, Warlord. They are new to the conflict." Drethkor's eyes narrowed. "New? They fight like demons." Our soldiers report that the humans do not break under pressure. They adapt to every tactic we use, and they seem to ignore injuries that should kill them. The warlord stood slowly. He had conquered 12 systems in 6 months. He had crushed every species that stood against him. He had never lost a battle so badly. Find out everything about these humans, he ordered. Where they come from, what they want, and most importantly, how to kill them. Back on the Coalition station, High Admiral Torren requested a private meeting with Commander Brooks. They met in a small observation room overlooking the stars. "I owe you an apology," Torren said quietly. "I put your forces in the rear because I thought you would be a liability. I thought you would panic and make things worse." Brooks nodded. "We understand. We were strangers with a strange reputation." "No, you do not understand." Torren turned to face him, all 4 eyes intense. "I have fought the Keth for 30 years. I have watched them destroy everything I love. And in one battle, your people did what no one else has done. You made them retreat. We just held our ground. That is exactly my point. No one holds their ground against the Keth. They hit hard and fast, and everyone breaks. Everyone runs. But your people stood there and fought like the Keth were nothing special." Torren paused. "The stories about humans, about your death world, are they true?" Brooks thought about Earth, about the hurricanes and earthquakes, the predators and diseases, the wars they had fought against each other before finally learning to work together. "Earth is difficult," he admitted, "but it made us strong and stubborn." Torren made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Stubborn. Yes, I saw that today." He extended a thin hand. "Commander, the Coalition needs more than rear guards. We need fighters who can take the battle to the enemy. Will your people join us on the front lines?" Brooks took his hand. "That is why we came." For the first time in months, High Admiral Torren felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Word spread through the Coalition faster than any ship could travel. On space stations and colony worlds, in military bases and refugee camps, people talked about the Battle of Velrith 7. They talked about the humans. "My cousin was there," a young Veloci pilot told her friends. She said the humans fought like nothing she had ever seen. One of them held a corridor alone for almost 15 minutes against a full Keth assault team. "That is impossible," someone argued. She showed me the recording. It is real. On the Coalition command station, Dr. Hannah Cole found herself surrounded by curious aliens every time she left her quarters. She was a xenobiologist, originally assigned to study alien species and help with cultural relations. Instead, she spent most of her time answering questions about humans. "Is it true your world has liquid poison falling from the sky?" a young officer asked. Hannah smiled. "We call it rain. It is just water. Most of the time. But the ancient records say your atmosphere contains a gas that causes metal to decay. Oxygen. Yes, we breathe it. It does cause some metals to rust over time, but we learn to work with it." The crowd around her grew larger. Hannah realized they were not just curious. They were trying to understand how a species from such a hostile world could exist at all. "Your planet sounds terrifying," said a small alien with large ears. "How did your species survive?" Hannah thought carefully about her answer. "We almost did not, many times. We had diseases that killed millions. Natural disasters that destroyed entire cities. We even fought wars against each other that nearly ended everything." She paused. "But we kept going. We adapted. We learned. And we got better. Why?" Someone asked. "Why did you not just give up?" "Because giving up was never really an option. Humans are stubborn that way." In the military section of the station, Joint training exercises had begun between human and coalition forces. It was not going smoothly. The aliens were faster in some ways, stronger in others. They had better technology and more experience in space combat. But the humans brought something different to the table. General Varric San, the coalition's ground forces commander, watched a training exercise with growing amazement. A group of humans had been given an impossible scenario, outnumbered, outgunned, with no path to victory. The expected response was for them to recognize the situation and surrender. Instead, the humans had improvised. They used the environment in ways no one had anticipated. They turned weaknesses into advantages. After 2 hours, they had not only survived, but had actually pushed back against a superior force. "This is cheating," one of the coalition trainers complained. They were supposed to recognize an unwinnable situation. General San shook his head slowly. "I do not think humans recognize unwinnable situations. They just see problems that need creative solutions." Sergeant Dawson's squad had gained a new member. Scout Lyris was a young alien with purple skin and wide golden eyes. She had been at the station during the battle and had watched the humans fight. Now she refused to leave their side. "I want to learn," she told Dawson. "I want to fight like you do." Dawson was not sure what to make of her. She was barely an adult by her species standards, and she looked at the humans like they were heroes from a legend. "We are just soldiers," he told her. "Nothing special. You held the line when everyone else ran. That is special." Private Grant, still recovering from his burns, sat nearby cleaning his weapon. "She has a point, Sarge. We did do something pretty impressive back there." "We did our jobs," Dawson said firmly. "That is all. Do not let it go to your head." But Lyris stayed with the squad, learning their tactics, studying their methods. She was a quick learner, and the humans found themselves growing protective of her. She reminded them of younger siblings, of the children they had left behind on Earth. In the War Council, Lieutenant Price presented a new battle strategy. She had spent days studying both human and coalition combat methods, looking for ways to combine them. "The coalition fights defensively," she explained to the assembled commanders. "You are excellent at holding positions and managing long campaigns. But the Keth are aggressive. They hit hard and fast, and defensive tactics alone cannot stop them. What do you suggest?" High Admiral Torren asked. "We combine our approaches. Coalition forces hold the main lines and provide support. Human forces lead rapid strike operations to disrupt Keth formations before they can build momentum. We use their aggression against them. That would put human forces in extreme danger," General San observed. Price nodded. "Yes, it would. But that is what we are good at." The strategy was approved. Training intensified. Human and alien forces learned to work together, each covering the other's weaknesses. It was difficult and frustrating, but slowly they began to function as a unified force. Meanwhile, intelligence reports brought troubling news. The Keth were building something on Kellis 4, a heavily fortified moon in a system they had recently conquered. The reports were incomplete, but what they showed was concerning. "It appears to be a weapon," the intelligence officer explained. "Based on the energy signatures, it could be capable of destroying entire planets. How long until it is operational?" Commander Brooks asked. "Unknown. But if they complete it, nothing will stop them." High Admiral Torren made the decision. "We cannot wait. We must assault Kellis 4 before the weapon is finished." It was the largest operation the Coalition had attempted in 20 years. Hundreds of ships, thousands of ground troops, all aimed at a single target. And at the front of it, all would be the humans. Commander Brooks gathered his people for a briefing. He looked at their faces, young and old, men and women, veterans and newcomers. They had come so far from Earth, answered a call for help from strangers, and now they were about to lead the most important battle of the war. "I will not lie to you," he said quietly. "This will be hard. Many of us will not come back. The Keth know we are coming, and they will fight to protect their weapon." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But if we do not stop them, they will use that weapon to destroy everything. Every world, every species, every child who is hiding in a shelter somewhere, hoping someone will save them." His voice grew stronger. "We did not come all this way to watch the galaxy burn. We came to fight. And that is exactly what we are going to do." The fleet launched the next day. As the ships jumped to hyperspace, Sergeant Dawson found Scout Lyris sitting alone, staring out of viewport. "Scared?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Are you?" Dawson sat beside her. "Every time. The fear never goes away. You just learn to work with it. How do humans do it? How do you keep fighting when everything seems hopeless?" Dawson thought about the question. It was something he had been asked many times since arriving in this strange part of the galaxy. "We do not fight because we think we will win," he said finally. "We fight because giving up feels worse than losing. And sometimes, if you refuse to quit long enough, you find a way to win after all." Lyris nodded slowly. "I think I understand." "Good, because we are going to need everyone at their best for what comes next." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Kellis 4. Below them, the Keth Dominion waited with everything they had. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The space above Kellis 4 erupted into chaos. Coalition ships poured out of hyperspace in wave after wave, their weapons already firing. The Keth defense fleet moved to intercept, and within seconds, the void was filled with explosions, debris, and death. Commander Brooks stood at the center of his bridge, watching the tactical display as it tracked hundreds of ships across the battlefield. Red and blue markers danced around each other in a deadly pattern. "Keth carrier at bearing 270, Lieutenant Price reported. "It is launching fighters. Task Force 7, intercept those fighters. Do not let them reach the troop transports." The human frigates broke formation and surged toward the enemy carrier. It was a dangerous move that left gaps in the main battle line. But Brooks knew they could not win this battle by playing it safe. On the Keth command ship, Warlord Drethkor watched the human tactics with growing interest. He had studied the humans since their first encounter. He had learned about their death world, their history of endless conflict, their impossible endurance. And he had prepared. "The humans are aggressive," he observed. "They take risks no other species would consider. Shall we exploit their gaps, Warlord?" His adjutant asked. "Not yet. Let them commit their forces. Then we will crush them." In the transport ships descending toward Kellis 4, Sergeant Dawson checked his squad's equipment one final time. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would land near the planetary shield generator and fight their way inside. Once the shield was down, the fleet could provide air support for the main ground assault. 90 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Corporal Vance finished strapping on her medical kit. Her shoulder still ached from the wound she had taken at Vora 7, but she had refused to stay behind. "Feels like old times," she said with a grim smile. Private Grant sat quietly, his burned hands now wrapped in thin protective gloves. He had not spoken much since the last battle, but when Dawson looked at him, he saw something different in the young man's eyes. The fear was still there, but it was controlled now. Focused. Scout Lyris was the most nervous. This was her first real combat operation. Her purple skin had gone pale, and her golden eyes were wide. But she held her weapon correctly and kept her breathing steady. "Remember your training," Dawson told her. "Stay close to Vance. Watch your corners. And if things get bad, do not hesitate. Hesitation will get you killed." Lyris nodded quickly. "I understand, Sergeant." The transport shuddered as it entered the atmosphere. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around them, filling the sky with deadly light. Two transports on their left took direct hits and tumbled toward the ground in flames. Brace for impact landing. They hit hard. The ramp dropped, and Dawson was moving before his feet touched solid ground. Go, go, go! The landing zone was a nightmare. Keth soldiers were everywhere, their weapons filling the air with plasma fire. Coalition troops poured out of their transports, some falling before they could take 3 steps. The noise was incredible screaming, explosions, the constant crack of weapons fire. Dawson's squad pushed forward, moving from cover to cover. The shield generator loomed in the distance, a massive structure surrounded by fortified walls and defensive towers. Between them and the objective lay half a kilometer of hell. Contact left, Grant shouted. A group of Keth had flanked their position. Grant and Vance turned to engage while Dawson and Lyris pushed forward. The squad worked together like a machine, each member knowing exactly where the others would be dot in space. The battle was not going well. The Keth had more ships than intelligence had reported, and they were fighting with desperate fury. Coalition cruisers were taking heavy damage, and the human fleet was spread thin trying to cover too many sectors. Lieutenant Price spotted the problem immediately. 3 Keth destroyers are breaking through on the starboard flank. If they reach the troop transports, we lose our ground forces. Brooks studied the display. Stopping those destroyers would require pulling ships from the main battle line. It would leave the flagship exposed. Do it, he ordered. Protect the transports. Sir, that will leave us vulnerable too, I know. Do it anyway. Price gave the orders. Human frigates peeled away from the flagship's escort and raced toward the destroyers. The Constellation was left with minimal protection, exactly as Warlord Drethkor had planned. Now, the Warlord ordered, all weapons on the human flagship. Destroy it. On the ground, Dawson's squad reached the outer wall of the shield complex. They had lost 2 soldiers on the approach, and everyone else had minor wounds. The wall was 3 meters high and supposedly impenetrable. We need another way in, Vance said. Grant studied the wall, then looked at the maintenance hatch near its base. There, that leads to the cooling systems. We can get inside through the ventilation network. How do you know that? Dawson asked. I read the intelligence reports. All of them. 3 times. Dawson almost smiled. Good work, Private. Lead the way. They crawled through dark tunnels that smelled of chemicals and heat. Lyris was terrified of the enclosed space, but she kept moving, her fear pushed down by sheer willpower. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they emerged inside the shield complex. The generator chamber was massive. The shield generator itself rose from the center of the room like a metal tower, humming with energy. And between them and the generator stood Warlord Drethkor himself, surrounded by 50 of his best soldiers. Humans, the Warlord said, his voice echoing in the chamber. I knew you would come here. You are predictable in your bravery. Dawson raised his weapon. Stand down. We are taking this generator offline. Drethkor laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. There are 5 of you and 50 of us. You cannot win. Then we will die trying. But we will take as many of you with us as we can. The Warlord tilted his massive head. Why throw away your lives? The shield will fall eventually. Others will come to finish what you started. Your deaths accomplish nothing. Dawson did not lower his weapon. Maybe. But those others will have a better chance because we did not quit. That is how humans fight. We are not links in a chain. We are the whole chain. And every link matters. Fascinating. And foolish. Drethkor raised one of his 4 arms. Killed him. The squad scattered as plasma fire filled the chamber. Dawson dove behind a control panel, returning fire as he moved. Vance pulled a wounded Lyris to cover, her hands already working to stop the bleeding from a wound on the alien's leg. Grant stood in the open for 3 full seconds, his weapon cutting down 4 Keth soldiers before a blast knocked him off his feet in space. The Constellation was taking heavy damage. Fires burned on 3 decks. The weapon systems were failing. Commander Brooks stood on his damaged bridge, watching his ship die around him. "Sir," a dying officer gasped. "The destroyers. Our frigates stopped them. The transports are safe." Brooks nodded. They had done their job. But the flagship was finished. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered quietly. Then he turned to Lieutenant Price. "Get to the secondary command vessel. Keep the fleet together." "Sir, come with me. Someone has to coordinate the evacuation." "Go." "That is an order." Price hesitated, then saluted and ran for the escape pods. Brooks turned back to his display, watching the battle continue even as his ship broke apart around him. In the shield complex, Dawson made a decision. They could not win this fight, but they could still complete the mission. "Grant, Vance, Lyris, fall back to the exit. I will cover you." "Sergeant, no!" Lyris shouted. "That is an order. Tell the fleet the shield is going down." "Tell them." He did not get to finish. An explosion rocked the chamber, and everything went white. When the smoke cleared, Dawson was lying on the ground, bleeding from wounds he could not count. Drethker stood over him, 1 foot on his chest. "Brave," the warlord admitted. "But futile." Dawson looked up at him and smiled through bloody teeth. "Check. Your generator." Drethker turned. The control panel that Dawson had been hiding behind was destroyed, and the shield generator was sparking, its power levels dropping rapidly. "No," the warlord breathed. The shield fell. Above Kellis 4, Coalition forces saw the barrier vanish, and they began to push through. Dawson closed his eyes. He had done his job. Now it was up to everyone else. Sergeant Dawson opened his eyes to pain. His whole body burned, and he could not feel his left arm. The ceiling above him was filled with smoke, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear weapons fire. "He is awake." Corporal Vance's face appeared above him. Her cheek was cut, and her uniform was torn, but she was alive. "Sergeant, can you hear me?" "Status," he croaked. "You have been shot 4 times. You have a concussion, and I am pretty sure your left shoulder is broken. You should be dead." "The mission?" Vance smiled through her exhaustion. "Shield is down. Fleet is pushing through. We just need to hold out until reinforcements arrive." Dawson tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The pain was incredible, but he had been through worse. Earth taught its children to endure. Where are we? Still in the generator complex. The exit is blocked. We are trapped in a side room with about 30 Keth between us and freedom. She hesitated. "Grant is hurt bad. Lyris is watching the door. We have maybe 20 minutes of ammunition left." 20 minutes. Dawson processed the information. "Not enough. Not nearly enough. Help me up, Sergeant. That is an order." Vance helped him to his feet. The world spun for a moment, then steadied. Dawson grabbed a rifle with his good arm and checked the ammunition. Half a magazine. He had fought with less. In the main chamber, Warlord Drethker raged at his soldiers. The shield was down. Coalition forces were pouring through the gap in the defenses. Everything he had built was falling apart, and somehow, these impossible creatures from a death world were responsible. "Find them," he ordered. "Bring me the humans. I want them to watch their fleet burn before they die." On the damaged remains of a Coalition cruiser, Commander Brooks had managed to survive the destruction of his flagship. He was wounded, exhausted, and running on nothing but willpower. But he was still in command, Status of ground forces? He asked. Lieutenant Price answered through the communication system. She had taken command of the secondary vessel as ordered and was coordinating the fleet's advance. We have troops landing all across the surface. The Keth are falling back toward the weapon complex. But sir, we have lost contact with Sergeant Dawson's squad. Last known position? Inside the shield generator facility. The building has partially collapsed. We cannot get a signal through. Brooks thought about Dawson and his people. They had done the impossible, taking down the shield against overwhelming odds. Now they were trapped, probably wounded, definitely running out of time. Get me a rescue team, he ordered. I am going down there myself. Sir, you are wounded. Those people saved this entire operation. I am not leaving them behind. In the side room, Dawson's squad prepared for their last stand. Grant was propped against the wall, barely conscious, his burned hands clutching a pistol he could hardly hold. Lyris had stopped shaking somewhere in the last hour. Her fear had transformed into something else, a cold determination that reminded Dawson of himself when he was young. When they come through that door, Dawson said quietly, we make every shot count. We buy as much time as we can. Maybe reinforcements will reach us. Maybe they will not. Either way, we do not make it easy for them. Sergeant, Lyris said, her voice steady, I want you to know something. Before I met you, I thought humans were just scary stories. Monsters from a nightmare world. But you are not monsters. You are the bravest people I have ever known. Dawson looked at her, this young alien who had followed them into hell because she believed in them. We are not brave. We are just too stubborn to know when to quit. The door exploded inward. Keth soldiers poured through, and the small room became a battlefield. Vance fired until her weapon ran dry, then drew her knife. Grant somehow rose to his feet and stood between the enemy and his wounded squad mates. Lyris fought with everything Dawson had taught her, and Dawson himself stood at the center, his broken body refusing to fall. The Keth kept coming, wave after wave. The squad kept fighting, second after second. Time stretched into something eternal, measured only in gunfire and blood. Then Warlord Drethkor stepped through the door. He was enormous up close, his dark scales scarred from decades of warfare. His 4 arms each held a different weapon. His eyes burned with hatred as he looked at the humans who had ruined everything. Enough, he said, and the firing stopped. The surviving Keth held their positions, weapons trained on the squad. Drethkor walked toward Dawson slowly. You should be dead 10 times over. I have killed 1,000 soldiers from 100 species. None of them fought like you. Dawson spat blood on the floor. We are not done yet. Yes, you are. But I want to understand something before the end. The warlord leaned close. What makes humans so difficult to kill? What is your secret? Dawson met his gaze. He thought about Earth, about the storms and the diseases and the endless wars, about the way humans kept building and hoping even when everything told them they should give up. We do not fight because we think we will win, he said. We fight because someone has to. Because if we do not, who will? Drethkor stared at him for a long moment. Then he raised his weapon. A noble sentiment. But sentiment does not win wars. The wall behind him exploded. Commander Brooks came through first, leading a team of human and coalition soldiers. They hit the Keth from behind, catching them completely off guard. The chamber dissolved into chaos once more. Brooks found himself face to face with Drethkor. The warlord was wounded, bleeding from the explosion, but still deadly. His 4 arms moved like lightning, and only Brooks's reflexes saved him from the first strike. They fought in the middle of the destruction. Human against Keth, commander against warlord. The fate of the galaxy compressed into a single desperate duel. In the end, it was not skill that decided the outcome. It was endurance. Drethkar landed blow after blow, but Brooks kept getting up. He was bleeding, broken, barely standing. But he refused to fall. "Why will you not die?" Drethkar screamed. Brooks smiled through the pain. "Because I am human, and we never learned how." He drove his blade into the warlord's chest. Drethkar fell. Around them, his soldiers surrendered or fled. The battle for Kellis IV was over. The Keth superweapon would never be completed. Days later, the Coalition held a ceremony on the command station. Thousands watched as High Admiral Torrin presented medals to the human forces. Commander Brooks stood at attention despite his injuries. Beside him, Sergeant Dawson's squad was lined up in their dress uniforms. Grant had survived, though the doctors said he would need months of recovery. Vance's hands were bandaged, but she was already planning her return to duty. And Lyris stood with the humans, having officially transferred to serve under human command. "Today, we honor those who came when we called," Torrin announced to the crowd. They were strangers from a distant world. A world so harsh that we believed no one could survive there. We thought they were legends, myths, impossible. He paused, looking at the humans. We were wrong. They are not myths. They are friends. They are allies. And from this day forward, Earth is a full member of the Galactic Coalition. The crowd erupted in cheers. On 100 worlds, people watched the ceremony and whispered to each other about the humans. The stories spread, but they were different now. No longer tales of monsters from a death world. Instead, they were stories of courage, sacrifice, and friendship. That night, Commander Brooks found Dawson on an observation deck, staring at the stars. "Thinking about home?" Brooks asked. "Thinking about the ones we lost, and wondering if it was worth it." Brooks stood beside him. "It was. Because of what we did here, millions of people will live who would have died. Whole worlds will survive. That is worth something." "I know. It just costs so much. It always does." Brooks put a hand on his shoulder. "But that is why we fight. So the cost means something. So the sacrifice is not wasted." Dawson nodded slowly. "What happens now?" "Now, we rebuild. We train. We prepare for whatever comes next. The Keth are weakened, but they are not gone. And there are other threats out there. The galaxy is a big place, and Earth is part of it now." "Yes, we are." Brooks smiled. The legends came to life. And now everyone knows what humans can do when we fight for something we believe in. Far across the galaxy, children on a dozen worlds heard a new bedtime story. Their parents told them about the humans, the strange creatures from a death world, who had seemed so frightening in the old tales. But now the stories were different. Now they told of humans who came when called, who fought when others ran, who stood in the darkness and refused to fall. The galaxy had believed humans were legends, monsters from a nightmare world best forgotten. They learned the truth was far more remarkable. Humans were simply people who never learned how to give up, and sometimes that made all the difference.